Hello, and thank you for joining me for the City Tax Law training for this year's VITA tax season. I'm Amanda Grover, and I'm the Tax Program Coordinator with Goodwill Industries for West Michigan. I'm the Program Coordinator that's in charge of VITA services for West Michigan, and I'm here to train you on the basics of City Tax Law. A lot of people are very familiar, especially at this point, with our federal tax returns and our state tax returns. But there are a few cities in Michigan, 22 of them at this point, that have what they call city taxes. Sometimes we get people that are very confused because they're not used to city taxes, especially if they're not from our area. Here in West Michigan, the ones that we see most often are Muskegon, Muskegon Heights, Grand Rapids, and Walker. But sometimes we'll see city taxes from a few other places. Those are the most common ones. And I'm going to go through some more information on this. There is going to be some reform in the upcoming years where they're going to be doing things a little bit differently. But for right now, I'm going to teach you what our tax software looks like as far as the tax situation and the information you need to know when you're completing these city returns for taxes. Detroit, also there's a lot of areas in Detroit that have a city tax. However, their tax form is set up completely different. Luckily, we haven't really seen any of those here in West Michigan, but if you do come across someone that had lived in Detroit and moved to Muskegon or something like that, and you're not able to get the Detroit city taxes figured out, by all means defer to your site coordinator or let me know, and I'm happy to help you with any of those issues. So reporting city tax, what is it? And what does it look like on the tax return? So the city tax is just like any other tax as far as the federal or state is concerned. You'll find it on W-2 if you've watched the previous modules and have gone through some of the tax-wise module training. You'll see that I keep referring to city taxes. City taxes are reported in boxes 18 and 19 and 20 on the W-2 forms, and that's where you're going to see any information regarding city taxes from the income statements. The biggest thing that I like to emphasize, especially in this training, is that you spell the name of the city correctly. And when I say correctly, I mean it has to be spelt just like the resource form I provided for you for the supplemental material for this training. If it's not spelled exactly like that, regardless of how it's spelled on the W-2, the information isn't going to carry over into the forms that you need, and it can get really confusing to input information. So review the form that's in the supplemental material for the city training and make sure that you understand that the cities have to be spelled exactly as it looks on that form in order for your information to flow properly and for this to be a much easier situation for you. As I indicated, this is the most clear W-2 that I could find, but I did want to use it as an example because it touches on a couple of the things I just said. So you'll get a W-2 form. This is more often than not the income that's going to be taxed. When you're filling out the city tax forms, the income is going to carry over, but the big thing that won't is what was withheld from the person's paycheck already. So when you're entering W-2 information, as I indicated, don't forget to fill out these boxes 18, 19, and 20. For whatever reason, when you're in the software, fill in box 19 first, and box 18 will automatically calculate. That's a quirk within the system. That'll make your life a little bit easier, so to avoid some frustration. Again, the locality name. So if it's Muskegon, you're going to spell it out. A lot of the time you'll see it abbreviated as MSK, but you'll want to spell it out MUSKEGON right in this box on the W-2 when you're in the software. What is the city tax? What does it look like? How do you know and understand it? Just so that you know, any city that taxes, the complete list of the 22 cities, I'm going to show an example of that in a few moments, but you'll indicate what city the person lives in and what city the tax return is being prepared for. So if a person lives in a city, that taxes, then they're going to be taxed at one rate, and then if they work in that city, they're going to be taxed at half of the rate as a resident is. And that's basically because they want people to be paying and contributing towards the cost of things like roads and infrastructure. So, for example, I'm going to use Muskegon most commonly because that's what's going to come up most common at our tax sites. Muskegon residents and Muskegon Heights residents are all taxed at 1% of all of their taxable earnings just because they live in that city. If a person just works in that city, so Muskegon or Muskegon Heights, they must pay a 0.5% from their total taxable earnings. So again, you'll deal with taxable income and non-taxable income, and the software will calculate that for you. And again, obviously things that are non-taxable are things like Social Security, and then taxable income is going to be something like wages. Again, the program is going to do that work for you, and they're going to do the calculation of the math, but it's really good to understand where these numbers come from. So again, like things like unemployment, workman's comp, SSI, those aren't taxable, so the program's going to do that part for you. And once again, I can't emphasize this enough, is make sure that you're spelling the name correctly in the tax software. So what cities had tax and how do you know? So a lot of the time employers don't actually withhold city tax. I believe it's an extra step in their accounting software. It can be costly for them. So a lot of the time you'll find people who may live in a city or may work in a city and then they don't really, they've never heard of somebody saying that you owe city tax. So we like to use this as an educational opportunity as well. So a lot of the time people do owe for their city taxes. In the tax software, this is going to be a complete list. So if you've been preparing the person's taxes, you'll be familiar with any of these cities that come up. So if they've worked or first, if they've worked in a city that they didn't live in, then you'll have to prepare, sometimes you have to prepare several city returns. So you have to prepare a return for a city that they work in if they don't live there, and you have to prepare a return for a city they live in if they work in a different city that is taxable. So that's where it gets kind of confusing, and that's where some of the volunteers have indicated that they'd like some more training. That's supposed to help, this is supposed to help with some of the clarification on that. So the first city return that you'll do as a tax preparer is just first for the city that the client lives in. So for example, they may live in Muskegon Heights. If that's the case, you'll check Muskegon Heights, and then you'll go prepare the return for first the Muskegon Heights because that's where they lived. If they worked in the city of Muskegon and lived in Muskegon Heights, then you'll also do a city of Muskegon return, but you'll indicate that they were a non-resident, and if that's the case, then the software does the calculation automatically. And if you indicate that the person is a non-resident, then they're going to tax that at 0.5% for the sake of Muskegon. The cities do tax at various percentage rates. So I keep referring to Muskegon and Muskegon Heights because those are what we see most commonly at our tax sites. However, if somebody has worked in the city of Grand Rapids or lived in Grand Rapids, their tax rates are a little bit different. The program will automatically calculate the tax rates, but it is good to know what they are for the common ones you'll see. So like I said, Muskegon and Muskegon Heights are the ones that I see the most. Those are taxed at 1% and a 0.5% for non-residents. For places like Grand Rapids and Walker, I believe their taxing rate, at least it was last year, it was 1.5% for residents and 0.75 or some, 0.75% for non-residents. So those are a little bit about the cities and the tax rates. Do know that the filing status, you do get, just like when you're preparing your state return or your federal return, there are exemptions that carry over and filing status carries over. Basically, each exemption on the city return is worth $600, so it reduces the taxable income by $600. The city portion can be very simple. Occasionally it gets really tricky if somebody has moved around a lot. If that's the case, it takes practice. You're going to have to get used to it. And don't be afraid of learning this. It doesn't get complicated once you can figure out the situation with the taxpayer. And I will say that we usually do taxes if you're volunteering in the Muskegon area, you're going to see a city return probably 40% of the time. So you'll see that city tax return. And like I said, if somebody hasn't moved at all, it's usually very simple. Or if they've moved within the same area. So if they've stayed in the city of Muskegon or if they stayed in the city of Muskegon Heights. I will say you will have to end up prorating and sometimes playing with the program and playing with the numbers if somebody has moved around. And that's where this does get a little bit tricky and confusing. For the purposes of our training, I'd like to keep things simple and let you get the concept of how the program works. So for a lot of our different training situations, I'm not doing situations where people have moved around a lot, and that's just to get you used to and familiar with the tax forms. Another thing that I like to point out is that the process for filing the city tax returns is a little bit different than the rest of the returns that we prepare. So the federal and the state tax returns can be e-filed. The City of Muskegon Heights, any of those tax returns for the city, those have to be mailed in by the taxpayer. The cities do not accept e-file. So when you print out, if somebody comes to the tax site and you have a city return, when you go to print out the federal and the state copy for the taxpayer, then you'll want to print out obviously a copy of the city tax return that you prepare for them, but you're also going to want to print out an extra copy so that they have the one to mail in. When you are looking at the one that they mail in, they have to sign it, and then you'll also have to attach one of each of the W-2s. And that's why people are provided so many W-2s. A lot of the time they'll bring in a sheet of paper, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and it's got 4 different W-2s. This is why, because sometimes if you're doing a city tax return, then you'll have to attach a W-2 to the form that's being mailed in. We'll go through a couple of examples. I do have a couple to show you through a webinar video that I've attached in the supplemental materials on our training page here. But by all means, please play around with this during open lab times or during some of your one-on-one time with either the program coordinator or another volunteer as you're practicing on your software. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And I also like to make sure that you're not, I start off very basic, and I know people get frustrated few and far between when they see the complicated situations come up. Like I said, I don't want to overwhelm you, so a lot of the returns I'm going to go through these training sites are very simple. However, make sure you take the time to kind of play around with the program and see what it looks like if you have somebody that's moved around a little bit, or how you play with the software to show different situations within the city or within the tax return in general. That's all I have for information. Please watch some of the demos I have for the city training. I have put in the Behringer example and in the overall tax-wise examples, I have indicated some of the more basic steps with city returns and those, but I've got a few more challenging ones and a few other examples, and I have those listed on our practice modules as well. So just stay tuned, make sure to watch and review all of your training material, and as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Thanks for watching.